So Luiz, as a driver, we got rules on the track that we need to follow, and each driver got different driving style as well. You as a designer, you have rules as well from the regulations. How would you describe yourself as a designer, or your style, and how do you begin to draw a car?
Right, yeah, okay. I think in modern F1 it's very much a team effort, as I'm sure you know already, having seen how many people we have that do the car. So in real terms I don't actually draw anything myself by hand or with pencils or even lay out much in terms of drawing parts. So we've basically got a team of around 20 people working just in full-size design that work on the full-size car only. And that's not including doing anything to do with the aerodynamic surfaces on the car. That's all done by Marianne's group. So we work closely with them in the initial stages of the design to work out where to put the wheels, you know, really sort of basic things like that, which obviously are all the winglets and parts of the car to do with the aero tied up, mainly relative to the wheels and the cockpit. Obviously you all know quite a bit about the cockpit. And we basically then work from there to try and give aerodynamics the biggest freedom they can to do whatever they like with the back or the front or the middle of the car, whatever it may be, within the constraints of the regulations, which, like you say, are quite tight these days, basically. So that's why most of the cars look fairly similar. So it's not like back in the days when there would be crazy cars turning up with very different layouts of whether it be fan cars, more wheels, all this kind of stuff. It's all very much more tied down than it used to be. And I think that's why they look relatively similar. So we very much start from putting things in the right places along the car and then deciding how we package things up and down the car, or trying to, in conjunction with the aerodynamics guys really. And then from there we start putting in place all the most structural aspects, which is basically the chassis that obviously you sit in, and all the aspects of the driver controls laid out within that, and the suspension package to make sure that fits within that. And I think in terms of style in general, because I'm a structural engineer by trade, so I started off doing stress analysis of suspension and wings and chassis. I'd probably start with it from that perspective more than anything else from my personal point of view, which I think is a fairly good way of working, because it means in aerodynamics terms I'll know if there's something that looks completely crazy we can't do. I'll probably know that without having to do too much work on it in our group, if you like. So I think that's... There
are 4 elements on the car which is really important. So tires, engine, mechanical and aerodynamic. The tires are the same for everybody. Everybody got the same tires. But the other 3 elements are really important in a car. But how do you define the percentage of importance of those 3 elements?
For sure the aero is the most important one, by a long margin to the other 2, basically.
Oh, really?
I think obviously you'd always take engine power or drivability as well, but again that's something we don't directly have control over. We can help influence it slightly by exhaust design and inlet design from the roll hoop, but beyond that the influence of those 2 items is pretty small on the overall engine performance really. Obviously we need to cool it correctly and make sure it's looked after from a reliability perspective, which isn't too bad. And then yeah, so basically aerodynamics for sure is the main driving force behind almost everything we try and do each year, or every update kit is mostly focused around that. Yeah.
Could you talk us through how your relationship with the people that you work, obviously they have to translate what you have in mind in reality. Could you describe how you work with these people and how is your relationship with them?
Not all that often do we all get together really, so ordinarily I'd just work with them in small groups. So talking about, for example, next year's chassis, which we're starting work on now, we'd be doing sort of group work in relatively small groups. We have a meeting in this room once a week to go through what's changed since the previous week and decide how to go forward with the various aspects of the design. So in terms of laying things out, I have 3 or 4 guys below me who look after their subgroups. So there's kind of another small tier of management in between me and most of the designers. So I tend to work more closely with those guys, but then when we need to talk about something specific, like say the front suspension for example, there'll obviously be guys that just do that. So we'll go and talk to them directly around their CAD screen or whatever and talk about how it's going. But in terms of group meetings, we don't really do many of those, to be honest, very often, in terms of the whole group, because it's a bit too big to do that easily. So it'd fill this room anyway. So.
And what's the part of the work that you most like it?
I think the interaction with people really enjoy, basically, trying to, just talking a lot, mostly, quite like that. And the challenge of trying to do something within the regulations, basically, because now they're getting tighter and tighter.
You don't feel frustrated about that? You cannot be so creative about it?
And I think, to be honest, I've not known it any other way, really. I wasn't ever really around in F1 when it was very free, so I can't really speak for how it used to be a long time ago, because I haven't really been doing it all that long, only 12 years or so. So ever since that time, the regulations fundamentally haven't changed all that much. They've just been tweaking areas mainly to do with aerodynamics to try and tighten down the boxes of what you can and can't do, really. So in terms of the car layout, it hasn't really fundamentally changed in the time I've been in F1, really. So the wings have always been in largely the same place relative to the wheels, plus or minus a few millimetres, and then they've tweaked some things up and down and forwards and backwards, but there's not been any massive changes in car architecture or cockpit layout or anything like that since I've been in it, really, which is possibly a bit strange to hear, but because I've just not been around long enough, I suppose, to have seen all the crazy cars from ages ago. So, yeah.
And how is your relationship with them off the track? By the phone? Have you speak with them? You have like a feedback from them? How's your relationship with them?
So during a race weekend, ordinarily there's an engineer at the circuit called Mervyn, who's basically a called reliability engineer, and he's effectively my conduit into the world of the trackside stuff, because I don't normally go to the races. So if there are any problems with the car, there's a reliability problem, it stops, or some system's not working properly, or something fails, whatever it might be, it can be small or big, whatever it is, we try and get some feedback after each session from him, either on the telephone or via emails, to then try and sort out what we can do, either immediately depending on how serious it is, or trying to put something in place for the next event, or even sooner depending on what it is, basically to try and fix what's going on. So again, depending on what that is, for example, it'll either be me then going out to talk to some of my guys to work out what we do next, where we can recommend what to do for the next session, for example, or chatting with Marianne about an aerodynamic fix, for example, for the next event, which would then involve her group as well. So they can quite easily be a fairly quick and big sort of chain of things happening, I suppose, during a race weekend. I think a good example is if there's some question mark over the aero setup, for example, we can do a quite quick chat about it at this end via the circuit, and then they do a tunnel test to confirm changes, for example, and then that'll be ready for the subsequent session on the car. So that's probably a good example. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All good stuff.
Thank you.